After 8 exhausting years fighting terrorist groups, there are important insights from the Obama administration that President Trump would be wise to heed. 16 years into the United States global war on terror, terrorist groups continue to proliferate in states that are either unwilling or incapable of defeating them. Not only has the threat of terrorism persisted, but it is escalating and intensifying in dangerous ways. The United States needs a comprehensive strategy to combat this threat. Such a strategy must be properly resourced, balancing civilian engagement with military tools and strengthening civilian protection standards. After 8 exhausting years fighting terrorist groups, there are important insights from the Obama administration that President Donald Trump would be wise to heed. President Trump's immediate predecessors responded to terrorist threats in different ways. President George W. Bush put the United States on a wartime footing. While he initially counted on a speedy and targeted intervention to topple the Taliban and weaken al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, the Iraq War and subsequent state-building failures pushed his administration toward an increasingly resource-intensive counterinsurgency strategy. President Barack Obama distanced himself from his predecessor's counterinsurgency model, shifting instead to a light footprint approach that consisted of expanded airstrikes, wide use of special forces and greater reliance on host government militaries. As for President Trump, in the heat of the presidential campaign, he was very clear about how he intended to confront terrorist groups, particularly the Islamic State ISIS. "I will quickly and decisively bomb the hell out of ISIS, will rebuild our military and make it so strong no one, and I mean, no one, will mess with us." 9 months into his presidency, Trump has indeed prioritized military action and downplayed diplomacy, soft power and political engagement. Without announcing a radical shift in strategy, he has loosened a number of constraints on the use of force. He has delegated authority to the military to set troop levels and undertake a much wider range of strikes. He has geographically expanded areas of active hostilities, and he endorsed a dramatic escalation in airstrikes in the spring, including dropping the largest non-nuclear bomb ever deployed in combat. While a new draft counter-terrorism strategy notes that the United States should avoid costly military commitments and demands that U.S. allies shoulder a greater share of the burden, the Trump administration to date has largely followed the Obama administration's plans to scale up military operations against violent extremist groups. In the near term, this strategy of military escalation will likely kill more terrorists, in more places and at a faster rate. Taking fighters off the battlefield demonstrates that these groups are not invincible, and may deter recruitment and spur defections. It will also deny terrorists the freedom of action to plot and carry out further attacks. But the experience of the last 8 years shows that an effective counter-terrorism strategy must do more. It should minimize civilian casualties and avoid playing into extremist groups' recruitment strategies. It needs to mobilize effective and professional local forces that can hold territory liberated from terrorist groups, and help legitimate governance structures to take root. This will require sustained political efforts to broker durable political settlements in conflict zones where terrorists take safe haven and exploit sectarian divisions. And a successful strategy must mobilize international partners, especially from Muslim-majority countries, to confront common threats, while using U.S. leverage to push for greater accountability and compliance with international human rights standards. The Obama administration made real progress on the first task, putting in place an initial legal and policy framework to protect civilians in U.S. counter-terrorism operations. But its progress on the other elements was incomplete. There is ample room for the Trump administration to do better. This will require Trump to preserve and strengthen the civilian protection gains that have already been made, while advancing and resourcing the right strategy to fulfill long-term strategic goals. In specific terms, this means that the Trump administration should bolster its diplomatic capability, rather than gutting the State Department's budget and capacity, in order to forge and manage relations with local, regional and international partners, and to undertake more effective peacemaking efforts. Likewise, Trump should invest in the development capabilities of USAID, multilateral institutions and civil society partners, all of which are critical to sustaining long-term rebuilding efforts in fragile areas. Finally, Trump should think very carefully about pursuing transactional counter-terrorism partnerships with corrupt autocrats and human rights abusers, whose poor governance records fuel the grievances and instability exploited by extremist groups. There is much Trump can learn from the difficulties of his predecessor to craft a thoughtful and effective counter-terrorism policy. Whether he chooses to take heed is another matter. The Trump administration's early counterterrorism decisions indicate a strong preference for forceful military responses, and a willingness to downgrade civilian protection concerns to enable speedier military action. Pages